So in terms of starting, I'm just going to start with Tony Blair and his digital IDs. What I would say is that a lot of subjects will be discussed. There'll be a post that comes out a bit later on with this video. They'll have all the links on them so you can go and have a look at the articles yourself. But former Prime Minister of the UK, Tony Blair, very famous in the 90s, he basically has said that digital ID is disruption that the UK desperately needs. And then at the same time, The Spectator came out with an article 2 days ago on the 24th of June saying that Brits don't want digital ID cards. Now, we've spoken about this a little bit before. The key thing is that it's all part of a globalist playbook. So there will be pros and cons to having things such as digital ID cards, but you will get sold down the river to the benefits. You won't get told about the negatives, increased tracking and so forth. You will only get told about the benefits, because what normally happens in a situation like this is that something bad happens, or maybe it's to do with migration or immigration or types of people entering countries, whatever it might be. And then all of a sudden, having a digital ID card is the savior. It's almost a case of hold our hands up. Well, here's the solution. This is what we can do. Oh, by the way, we're just going to, take X, Y, and Z from you. And like anything, you keep giving an inch or taking an inch, and next thing you know, you're taking a mile. And it's really not a good position to be in. I'm not surprised that someone like Tony Blair has come out and said, well, hang on a minute. We need digital ID cards because of X, Y, and Z. Doesn't surprise me that that's happening. What I am happy to see is, again, from the Spectator, looking at the article, Brits don't want digital ID cards. And I would say that around the world, people don't want digital ID cards either. It's almost like it's an infringement on our human rights to an extent, because it just means we're going to be monitored more. And then if we get a digital ID card and then a central bank digital currency comes in, and then if we express, for example, a political view that goes against the mainstream media narrative, then all of a sudden, if we've got a digital ID connected to a central bank digital currency, and we want to go and eat a steak or go on a holiday somewhere, we might be banned from doing that because of the interconnections that they have, because we disagree with something that Big Brother doesn't like. That's my theory on it. So I'm very skeptical on anything to do with digital ID cards personally. Maybe your opinion is different, and if it is, fair enough. My opinion is that they're not good, they're not healthy, and they're all just part of a bigger globalist playbook, especially when central bank digital currencies come flying through the door. Now, of course, we look at digital currencies, and I think we're in a case where the people of New York City are saying, hold my beer, because this chap called Zoran Mamdani, I think I've got that name right, born in Uganda, to the best of my knowledge, he is trying to become mayor of New York City. Now, fine, you might argue that that's okay. However, he is a massive socialist. Now, given the people that operate in and around New York City, we're looking at AOC in particular, and the surroundings, bringing in a socialist mayor might sound like a good idea. But when you start reading what he's planning to do, number one being bring in government-owned and operated grocery stores to the Big Apple. That is, as the New York Post has put this, and I quote, is a Soviet-style disaster in waiting, end quote. And I'd agree with that. Now, the thing with bringing people like this in is that, as time and time again, as history would suggest, socialism doesn't work, full stop. Now, I'm not saying that capitalism is perfect. Capitalism has its flaws as well. But if we put the two side by side, arguably capitalism is far more successful than socialism. So if you're trying to bring in, or if this guy gets elected, then goodbye New York City. Now, people that might live in New York City might argue that it's gone so far down the road anyway that it's already waved goodbye. But this would be a big step in the wrong direction. It really, really would. And I read an article, I haven't found the link to that, it might have been a tweet actually, that the gross or net profit that a supermarket in New York City makes is about 1.6%. That's a fine margin in any business. That is a very fine margin. So the fact that food prices and inflation are very high across certain parts of the USA, that's probably down to government policy, not necessarily just the current government that the US has, but also previous renditions of government as well. Because sometimes these policies, whether it's to do with eggs or culling chickens or supply chain issues, these things take time to play out. So I imagine I'm trying to be fair here in saying that the reason that the US has a lot of inflation issues and food cost issues across the board, etc., is probably down to both the current administration and previous administrations' handling of such things. But if you're going to bring in, and if the people of New York City are going to elect Zohan Mamdani, and he's going to bring in his socialist style government superstores, I think that's going to spell absolute disaster for the people of NYC, the Big Apple itself. Of course, if you live in New York City, do drop a comment. I'd be interested to know what people on the ground are thinking. I'm attacking this from not just a British point of view. Most of the listeners to Contrarian Capitalist are from the USA. So it's important for myself to try and understand even more so what's going on. All I can say is it's a red flag and it doesn't make sense to me. And I just think it spells danger if this guy gets voted in. Now, later on in the week, Tom Luongo from Gold Goats and Guns is going to be back on the podcast. I'll probably ask him about this, to be honest, because he knows a lot more about things that are happening, not just in the USA, but also around the world as well. So do check out that podcast when that gets released. In terms of sticking with the USA, I'll just go for generic news. I'm just looking at the article now. Obviously, last weekend, strikes on Iran, were nuclear facilities targeted? Well, yes, they were targeted, but were they destroyed? Obviously, we're getting two sides of the coin here. I know that previous podcast guest, Dr. Anis Al-Haji, pointed out that even if Israel and Iran, even if the facilities had been destroyed, it's not really in anyone's interest at all to say that they've been destroyed. Because if you say that they've been destroyed, then a lot of people around the world would go, well, if that's your objective completed, there's no point attacking anymore. So even if they haven't been destroyed, you're not really going to want to say that they've been destroyed, because if your objective is to destroy them, of course, that just gives you an excuse per se to keep, bombing the hell out of Iran. Simon Hunt was on the podcast earlier this week as well, and he mentioned a report that I had no idea about, which was a Brookings Institute report 2009. Basically, I think it's along the lines of the path to Persia. He mentioned that report. I put a link to that report in the podcast, and I've subsequently read through that report as well. And I've come up with an article that gives a concise 10-point summary of that report. It's about 170 pages long. What I'll do is I'll put the link in the post that comes with this as well, because if you've got time, I'd recommend you read it. And it goes back to 2009, and it does suggest a lot of things that the US could do in and around Iran. Interestingly, it recommends or comes up with the possibility that Israel could potentially take military action under a couple of reasons. And again, written back in 2009, but benefit of hindsight in 2025, we've actually seen a couple of them play out, which I don't know whether you want to call that prophecy or just strategic thinking. Point being, I've written a summary article of it, but I'll put the link to the whole thing below. Simon was very concise with what he was saying about where the USA is at the moment, and then what they could do in the Middle East, and then how that affects the bigger picture and how they're likely to work with NATO moving forward to then possibly incite a full-on war with Russia, and then possibly again looking at bases that they have around the world, then to try and strangle China moving forwards. Again, that was Simon's opinion on what's likely to play out moving forwards. I'll put a link to that podcast below. That is now available to everyone. Again, Tom Luongo from Gold Goats to Guns. We're going to record Friday. That's going to go out to paid subscribers first. And at the time of recording this video, Bob Coleman of Idaho Armored Volts, we had a little chat yesterday on Wednesday the 25th. Again, currently that's out to paid subscribers. That'll be out to free subscribers later on this afternoon. And again, I highly recommend you go and listen to that. We spoke a lot about platinum because that's been on an absolute tear so far this year. And then we deep dived into dealers and what to do if you are thinking about purchasing bullion, because imagine if you're watching this, you might have bullion, you might not have bullion. If you don't have bullion, how do you go about buying bullion? Do you want to store it in your own home? If you're going to not want to store it in your own home, are you going to store it with a vault? If you store it with a vault, then what's the best storage to have? Is it segregated, allocated, or pooled storage? Bob, having run Idaho Armored Vaults since 2008, I believe, has got a lot of knowledge. So again, really good podcast. Highly recommend you check that out. That's coming out for free a bit later on today. But going back to the US and Iran, again, we're seeing mixed different messages from around the world. So what's, how successful have these strikes been? Different people are saying different things. All I can say is I think that this conflict is not going to go away anytime soon. Truce or no truce, I think Pandora's box has well and truly been opened. I can imagine that tensions are going to, flare up even more, unfortunately, moving forwards. Sticking with the, dare I say, the potential 51st state of the USA, our friends over in Canada. And again, what we're seeing is not a surprise. We are seeing the fact that Mark Carney has been placed in charge as the Prime Minister of Canada. And no surprise, given his previous roles in the Bank of England and so forth, he is looking for Canada to forge closer ties with the EU rather than just looking south of the border in the USA. Now, again, I appreciate that a lot of people have said a lot of different things recently with regards to Canada being the 51st state and, Trump riling up people and so forth. But again, if you look at Canada and you look at what they're doing and how they're going about it, then it's really just part of this, again, globalist playbook. What I mean by that is we're seeing a lot of high immigration numbers into Canada. We're seeing a lot of native Canadians, I think, getting very, cheesed off with what's happening. Some are, moving out of the country. I know that previous podcast guest John Carter is, very against what's happening in Canada at the moment. And again, it seems to be part of this globalist playbook. I can say that because what Canada's doing is pretty much what the UK is either doing or the UK has done. And again, it's really not healthy, because it means that if you are a Canadian taxpayer, for example, you're going to be on the hook for a lot of these crazy ass government policies. We are in the UK as well. You pay your tax to a government that seemingly wants to invite as many people as they can across borders. They are doing seemingly more work out of the country than they are in the country to, help their own citizens. And you have to go where you're treated best. And this is why I'm always an advocate of, rather than sitting around and complaining about it, we can always do something to help ourselves. And that is where what I always like to say, gold, silver, platinum, physical metals, they get yourself out of the system. Bitcoin as well, that will get yourself out of the system. And if you don't like where you are, then you can also move. I've done that. I have left the UK for a multitude of reasons. So I'm based in a different part of the world. So I've taken action on that, because you have to go where you're treated best. And, I know that's easier said than done for a lot of people, but we always do have options in the world. The damning point about Canada, again, wanting to have closer ties with the EU, you can argue with that part of the Commonwealth. Again, I just look at Mark Carney's history. I look at the fact that he's under the globalist thumb as well. Davos says jump. Mark Carney says, how high? It's the same in the UK. So again, if you're listening to this from Canada, I do have sympathy with you, because we are seeing the same things happening back home in the UK as well. And it's only going to go in one direction, and that's not in a good direction. I can tell you that now. Talking of EU and defence and NATO, Trump says that NATO defence spend rising to 5% of GDP is a big win for the US and the West. Well, depends what way you want to look at it. So if you're looking from an American point of view and they don't want to keep funding NATO and they want to maybe sever ties with NATO and they want to put EU defence in the hands of the EU, so America's not on call to help if things get problematic, which again, between the EU and Russia, I would say things are going to go downhill, which I don't like to say, but let's be realistic. I think they're going to go downhill. So if the US is taking a step back from that, and that's Trump's way of doing that, then I say fair play to him. He's obviously one step ahead of the game in that regard. But from an EU point of view, let's have a look at what that means by defence spending rising to 5% of GDP. Well, we see in the EU and the UK that there are a lot of financial issues behind closed doors. We are seeing that governments are, not just the governments, it's local councils, it's local everything. Basically, a lot of people in a lot of these countries are just absolutely wasting away finance. Finance is being spent on useless things. I've always been a fan of Doge. I think we need UK Doge. I think we need EU Doge. The problem is, financially speaking, I think the EU and the UK are so far down the slippery slope that I don't think it matters what happens. I think we're gone. And as we've seen before through history, what happens when you get yourself into a financial pickle is you need to divert attention. And unfortunately, that normally comes in the form of war. This is why the EU is hankering for a war with Russia. A war that, by the way, shouldn't have happened in the first place, because NATO shouldn't have kept expanding its borders from the 90s all the way up to present day. So that being said, because I think everyone realizes that they're in a financial pickle, they've got to find their way out of it. And again, just studying history, looking at what's happened before, looking at what's likely to happen again, that's going to be war. And I don't like saying that, but again, it's being realistic. I pride myself on being realistic on, these videos and the content that's provided. So if EU defence is now going to be 5% of GDP, what does that mean? That means likely that your government is, or central bank, going to have to print the extra euros or the extra pounds in order to meet that target. I do not see governments taking, a bit less from here and then adding a little bit here, or balancing the book, so to speak. I don't think anyone's physically responsible at the moment. So the odds are that in order to facilitate that increase in GDP for defence spending, I should say, what's going to happen is these pounds and these euros are going to get printed. And what that means is that it will take 18 to 24 months for all of that to work through the financial plumbing of the respective economies. And that would lead to inflation. That will also lead to a devaluation of the currency. Not a surprise. And of course, that works hand in hand with the gold price. So when you see gold going up, it's not necessarily that gold is going up in price. It's a devaluation of the currency. This is why when we talk about Plan B, and again, if you listen to this and you're in the EU and you're in the UK, this is the path that your governments are trying to take you down, a massive hot war. If that happens, and because of the socialist style and nature of some of the governments, what could happen is conscription. And if you do not want to stand and fight for something that you don't believe in, or an ideology that you don't believe in, then that's why I say to people, you need to look at Plan B. You need to have that option to get out, or start looking to get out now, because this could feasibly happen moving forwards. And I don't want to see that happen to you. That's why I enjoy doing these videos. And again, the realism side is here. That's why I say Plan B is very plausible. Could be temporary residency, could be a permanent residency, could be a citizenship of a different country. Some are easier to obtain than others. Paraguay is very popular at the moment. Mexico is relatively straightforward, but their income levels are increasing. Maybe you've got ancestry in a different country. Maybe your mum or dad is from a different part of the world. Maybe your grandparents are from a different part of the world. You could, I would imagine, quite easily obtain citizenship through ancestry. That could be quite easy depending on the country. The point with the defence spending increasing and governments printing their pounds or their euros and leading to a further devaluation of currency, well, that's going to be good for the gold price. But also, this is why gold is the ultimate inflation hedge. So if you're concerned and you can see what's coming down the road, and again, this is not a financial recommendation, not financial advice. This is why I always say to people, you should start looking at purchasing gold. You should start looking at purchasing silver. They are true money. Yes, silver has more industrial uses than gold does. You could also start looking at platinum as well. Platinum's up, what, about 30 to 35%, maybe 40% just in 2005 alone. It's gone under the radar for a lot of people. Again, gold and silver are true money. Platinum's an interesting play as well. Maybe palladium if you can get your hands on it. Because we've seen this happen before and we're likely to see this happen again. That when people start spending, or governments and central banks start printing and printing and printing, it will take a couple of years to work itself through the financial plumbing of the economy. And again, if we are being led down to this path of a hot war, which I think is what's happening at the moment, you're going to want to protect yourself. And again, gold, silver, platinum, Bitcoin as well, they could be ultimate protection hedges moving forwards. Again, none of that is financial advice. If you're concerned about being conscripted and you're living in the UK and you're living in the EU, then get out. Yeah, get out, have a look. Again, if you want in the easiest country at the moment, that's going to be Paraguay. I could put you in touch with people that can help you with that. If you want, just send me a DM later. But these are steps that we have to take, not just to protect yourselves, but to protect your family as well. And they might sound quite drastic, but it's not too late to take this sort of action. I've done it, and I recommend, well, yeah, I suggest that you look into doing it as well. So this is what we've seen going on around the world. As I said, links will be in the post that comes out of this video a bit later on. I appreciate if you're watching this live. Again, it will be released later on. We've looked at Tony Blair back in the UK and digital IDs. He's saying one thing, the people are saying another thing. It's all part of the globalist playbook. We're looking at Zoran Mamdani and potentially bringing a Soviet-style influence to New York City. I don't say that lightly because that's going to have disastrous effects. What I'm hoping, and a couple of people on Substack have said this, is what they're hoping is that people that have voted that way are then not moving to different states because they don't like what they voted for and are then voting for the same things in other states. I don't know, that could be part of an even bigger USA playbook from the left side of politics over there. I have no idea, but it wouldn't surprise me. I've also seen the latest on USA, Iran and Israel, who's bombed who, have these facilities been taken out? Ultimately, it's in everyone's interest to admit that the facilities haven't been taken out, especially from an Israel and USA point of view, because it means that you can just keep going in there until things have been destroyed. And of course, from an Iranian point of view, even if things have been destroyed, you're not going to admit it because that will lose face across the world. By the way, anyone that thinks the Hormuz Strait is going to close, not happening. We're getting into numerous debates. And again, this is off the back of the podcast with Anas Al-Haji. The Iran or the Strait of Hormuz is not going to close. The shallow side of the strait is the Iranian side. In order for the Iranians to actually properly close it, number one, they're going to do more economic damage to themselves. They're going to affect their trading partners because most of the goods and services and so forth actually go out to China. And the deep side, where the shipping actually happens, is on the Omani side. So for Iran to turn around and just close the Strait of Hormuz, not happening. Absolutely categorically not happening. So I was getting in a few debates on LinkedIn with people about that in the last week. That was interesting. Point being that, again, if we're talking about nuclear facilities, it's not in their interest, anyone's interest, to admit that they have been destroyed. And maybe we will never know. We'll see what happens. All I know is it's going to heat up moving forwards. And then we've also had a look at EU and Canada forging closer ties. And we've had a look at the defence spending rising to 5% of GDP in the EU and the UK. And again, maybe that's Trump's way of taking a step back from a US point of view, but ultimately from a UK and EU point of view, the leaders and everyone, they are pushing us down to a hot war, whether we like it or not. I don't take any enjoyment in saying that, but again, it's about being realistic. I'll finish with a couple of bits of housekeeping. I mentioned Simon Hunt on the podcast earlier on in the week. That's now live to everyone. That link will be in the post with this. The podcast episode with Bob Coleman, that's going to be released a bit later on this afternoon. That's going to be for everyone as well. It's available to paid subscribers at the moment. And then the podcast being recorded with Tom Luongo of Gold Goats and Guns. We're going to record that Friday morning. That's going to go out to paid subscribers straight away. That'll be released to the general public on Monday the 30th, I believe, Monday the 30th of June. Also on Monday the 30th of June, Chris Steadley from LiveScore Commodity Corner will be back with the monthly wrap. And of course, we have a lot to talk about. A lot has happened in the month of June as well. In terms of paid subscribers, founding members, free subscribers and followers, massive thank you for helping the channel to grow. It really is a pleasure to be able to do this. If you are yet to become a free subscriber, please do so. There is going to be a button in the video as well, or just head to contrariancapitalist.substack.com. If you'd like to support independent media and support the channel further and have access to all the podcasts before public release and all of the newsletters, the weekly wrap newsletter, weekly open, monthly wrap, and also the mid-month macro with Chris Steadley of LiveScore Commodity Corner. Again, in order to get full access to all of that, you can become a paid subscriber. Or if you'd rather not want to do that, that's absolutely fine. I've also introduced a Buy CC a Coffee. So there's a website called Buy Me a Coffee. Again, there's a button and a link that will come with the post. If you don't want to become a paid subscriber for the channel, but you enjoy the work, you enjoy these videos, you enjoy the written content, you can buy me a coffee instead. Again, that would be absolutely superb. There'll be a button that comes with this post as well. So it's just finding what option works best for you. But as I mentioned, if you're not yet a free subscriber, please do become one. If you're not yet a paid subscriber or founding member, please do consider doing so. And then also, if you just want to buy me a coffee because you enjoy the work and enjoy the content, please again do so. The button will be below, or the button will be in the post that comes with this video. I'll be back tomorrow. I'll be back later on with Bob Coleman. That'll be released to the general public. Also, Tom Luongo with paid subscribers tomorrow. And of course, we'll be back with the weekly wrap tomorrow after market close on Friday. Have a fantastic day. Thank you very much. Do hit those subscribe buttons and those like buttons as well. And see you in a video next week.